Everybody know ain't no party like a Diddy party.
It's a rare condition this day and age to demand a freak off with so much rage. The strangest addiction that you'll ever find. Some people say that he's losing his mind. Well, then there must be some magic juice inside the Punisher. 'Cause all I see is a chocolate thing. Man, they're busting over everything. Days gone by. It's the biggest break of the century.
Mogul's racketeering and sex trafficking trial. The defense has been attacking the credibility of the government's case and the testimony of its witnesses, telling jurors that Combs is on trial for what the defense calls a swinger's lifestyle.
Combs's lead attorney has the federal searches on Combs's homes and has used humor and sarcasm trying to slam the federal RICO charges. The defense has also painted Combs as an ambitious entrepreneur who broke barriers.
If you're put in a position where all this type of stuff comes out about you.
Now who did that?
And people are claiming to be victims of you, and you don't even go up and defend yourself. And I know people say, hey, in our laws we allow that, it's okay. Even if you don't defend yourself, that's fine.
Innocent until proven guilty.
Me personally, if I see someone doesn't defend themselves, to me, that shows, and I know this is not 100% true, but to me, I view it as a version or some aspect of guilt.
Guilty, guilty, guilty!
Because if I was in Diddy's position, which I would never be in, I would want to defend myself. And yes, I'm going to get cross-examined, but because I know I haven't done these things, in his instance, if he's of that belief, I would go understand. But him not doing that, to me, I think the jurors took notice of that.
In the music industry, Combs faces up to life in prison if he's convicted on the most serious counts against him.
Let's look at these. Transportation to engage in prostitution. He has done that tenfold. Too many times throughout this trial that has been proven and shown through Cassie's testimony, through many other people's testimony. Sex trafficking, that ties into the transportation to engage in prostitution. It ties both into that. That has been shown. The racketeering conspiracy, that has also been shown, but if there's one that maybe he could get off on, maybe they could find him innocent on that, but the other two counts for sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution, that is a clear cut slam dunk. And I've said this in a past video, please watch it. Pretty good video, very humorous, and I'm telling you, did he go to jail?
He has pleaded not guilty to all charges that he's facing. Let's go to CNN anchor and chief legal analyst Laura Coates, who is there outside the federal courthouse. Laura, what's the latest?
This has been an amazing closing defense argument. We were waiting to figure out what they would say as the defense, and here we have it. It's a tale of two trials, they're saying. One, on the one hand, with the evidence and witness testimony tells you, on the other hand, what the prosecutors want you to believe, which is why they went into great detail about the kind of person that Sean Diddy Combs is, aspects of DEI and diversity ahead of his time in terms of corporate America, talking about love life and his lifestyle and things that you might not be able to relate to, but that is there. It was really a striking contrast in style and tone from what the prosecution gave. This one far more folksy, far more meandering, but in the same vein, trying to go to the heart of the matter to convince this jury that there is nothing to see if the government was invited into a bedroom of this particular couple. They own the domestic violence, but say that's very separate from what this really is, and they question, almost guffaw at the idea of this being a RICO case.
And Laura, how would you describe Combs' demeanor through all of this?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I pay attention when people think that no one else is watching. And so while there was a break and the jurors left the courtroom. Do you know what was happening? I wondered, did Sean Diddy Combs, was he satisfied by his counsel? Well, at times he was smiling. He was interacting. He was talking to them. He was almost pantomiming and imitating his counsel while he was speaking. His daughters, who were in a row or two behind him, passed up a note through counsel and then looked back at each other and kind of gave a fist bump and smiled to their father in an encouraging way. There was also a moment as well where one of the daughters, one of his twins, was rubbing the back of his mother, who seemed to be very emotional during the testimony, or excuse me, during the closing portion of the argument, where the defense counsel suggested this was a vulnerable person with whom he shared intimacy with Cassie and Jane, and almost suggested that he himself was being exploited in their now willingness to divulge different details about it. She had her head down, she was almost curled over.
That, to me, is the most charitable view I can give of them trying to exploit him, is maybe for his money and his access to fame. But in every other regard, he was the one doing the exploitation in terms of the sex acts and the prostitutes and all the things that they were doing for many years, keeping these recordings of it, having it as blackmail. Like, come on. But again, he's paying them millions of dollars. They're going to have to do whatever they can to get to the closing statement. And once he's found guilty on a few of the charges, he's going to go away for a while. But the most shocking thing is if he were to be found innocent on all charges. My mind would be blown away.
This court finds
Diddy
innocent of all charges.
Not on my watch.
But highly intrigued on the reasoning behind that. But I am very, very confident that that is not going to happen. There could be some he may be found innocent of, but regardless of what happens, he is going to spend time in jail. I've been repeating it, and if you don't believe it, it's because you're in denial. This man is going to rot in prison. And deservedly so for some of the things he did. And in a perfect world, to me, Cassie should have been charged as well. But hey, it's not gonna happen.
The part about this too is, right, if Diddy did pay a prostitute or pay somebody for sex, right?
Yeah.
Diddy's the only one being charged. The prostitute himself is not being charged. They just got immunity. The other person that paid for it got immunity. Everybody got immunity.
I promise you, if Diddy come home, you ain't gonna be a Ciroc boy.
I don't. But you gotta base it off of everything. Everybody should be charged for this.
But even
everybody should be charged.
But even
because she was engaged with the prostitution and setting it up and having them go across state lines as well. So she should be at fault as well. But in many aspects, she was a victim to the violence, even though that's a separate charge. But Diddy did a lot of bad things. So if you're a Diddy stan, let's talk about it in the comments and explain to me, how do you think this man's going to be found innocent? I don't know. I don't see it. But in reality, I just clearly see a man going to jail, the defense giving their closing statement because, hey, we have to, so we're just going to make you think, oh man, he's a good guy. You know, he went through ups and downs and how the industry was when he was coming up. And these women are coming after for his money. That's all they're going to be saying because that's all they can say. They had no witnesses on their end. Do you get what that means? Like, the defense, a lawyer's going to do their job, point blank. But if you can get these lawyers behind closed doors, they will tell you, man, this man doesn't have a shot in hell of not seeing some time behind bars.
And one of the daughters was rubbing her grandmother's back, a very human moment indeed. And in fact, the defense counsel wanted everyone to know in that courtroom that his children, 6 of the 7, the youngest one being an infant, were there in that room. But the idea of a nod, there was a moment when Mark Agnifilo described Kid Cudi and that the now infamous attempted arson or Molotov cocktail of the car and said, this is not the person Diddy is. He would have gone and confronted him. He's no coward. A cowardly act is the Molotov cocktail, to which Diddy nodded profusely. I'm telling you, everyone is leaned in today.
Laura Coates live outside the courthouse in Manhattan. Thank you so much for the update.
Joining us right now is CNN legal analyst, criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson. This is a big day for the defense team, well, for the entire trial, let's be honest. Let's start with closings to bring us up to speed where we are. What did you hear as really the closing argument from the prosecution?
All right, so Kate, good morning. So this is the essence, criminal enterprise, and there are all of these acts that go to establish it, like what? Like the kidnapping, like the arson, like the drugs, like all of the other lawless behavior that he engaged in, which would establish, ladies and gentlemen, the criminality of this enterprise over an extended period of time, which he was able to do because of his power, money, and influence. And by the way, as it related to the sex trafficking, prosecutors say this was coerced behavior, and it only takes one instance, say prosecutors, with regard to his coercion to establish that they were trafficked. And finally, the crossing of state lines with respect to engaging in prostitution, you got it. Receipts, records, all indications that he was doing it. That was the narrative that they gave the jury yesterday in the over 4 hours of information that they delivered.
I mean, you sum it up, as you always do, very well. But, I mean, it was over 4 hours that they were trying to link it together. But the burden of proof is on them. And so that is part of it, of course. Then it comes to the defense team. They're trying to present. I mean, they basically didn't present a case in court, as they didn't call a single witness of their own. What does that mean for the task ahead for them today?
So what they did, and I think they're banking on, is that issue, you mentioned it, the reasonable doubt and the burden, right? The defense doesn't have to put on the case. The burden lies with the prosecution. They are confident. The defense is that they've laid out the reasonable doubt through what they've talked about through the whole trial. So what will they say? What they will say is that this is a legitimate business. This was private conduct. These were long-term relationships. And the fact of the matter is that this is not and doesn't amount to any criminal enterprise at all. And by the way, as it relates to this issue of criminal enterprises, usually you'll see a rat. You know what those are? Those are people in your inner circle who come and say, we agreed to do something illegal. Where are they, ladies and gentlemen? How do you engage in a criminal enterprise for RICO where there's no conspiracy? Did you hear one witness come in here saying there was an agreement with Mr. Combs to engage in criminality? No? Well, then he's not guilty of RICO. And with respect to the issue of this sex trafficking, these were long-standing relationships. The government came up here yesterday during their closing and they said, take one? It only takes one instance? But yet they have the nerve in their narrative to tell you he was doing things for over a decade of sexual exploitation? Which one is it? The reason they said you only have to choose one is because they don't have the goods, never had them, and they misled you because of the fact that these were willing participants.
Only a dummy would fall for this. Only a dummy. Because it's clear as hell with the receipts that the prosecutor has given that the sex trafficking happened, the prostitution happened. That is not a relationship. That is a crime. A straight up, point blank period crime.
We'll focus on that. And at the end of the day, if they're able to establish the defense that there is doubt with respect to criminality, legitimate private conduct, nothing to do with the business, complicated relationships, certainly unconventional with regard to how he lived his life, but domestic violence, finally, you saw a lot of it. They need to embrace it. Domestic violence, we're not here for that. We're here for racketeering. We're here for sex trafficking. And at the end of the day, they have not established, the defense will say, the elements of the crime charged. Our client is not guilty.
Bullshit, man! Bullshit! Diddy's the only one that's charged. The prostitutes are not charged. None of the other people that paid are charged. Nobody else is charged but Diddy. Because everybody got immunity, correct?
This is why people should just be gay.
What?
He could have had all the men he wanted legally. You know what I mean? And wouldn't have to freaking fight through none of this red tape if he just had the freedom to be himself.
But what if one of his things that get him
gay? What if he bisexual?
That's why he should just be gay.
Whatever it is, all I'm simply saying is you bringing all of these men in, okay, for whatever reason. All right, he just felt like he wasn't free to be whatever it is he was supposed to be, so he had to pay for it.
What if he
allegedly?
I think it's the gay or bi. I think he wanted a professional pounder to pound out his girl.